Today, I'll be showing you how to set up and play Arboro. Begin by opening the box, and inside you will find some documentation about SAPI, including learning how paper and papermaking shape a rich world around us, and a guide to their papers and the things that make SAPI different. Before we move on, I want to briefly show that inside this pamphlet, there are pages that explain all of the different paper products that SAPI used in the creation of the board game that you are about to learn how to play. You can set these aside. They are not used when playing the game. And the next document is the rulebook to teach the game, and I will be explaining you how this works as we continue. Next up, we have the game board and a sticker sheet, and after that, a series of punch boards. You can remove this and remove each cardboard token. Next up, we see boxes that hold the cards used when playing the game. We also have some notes for money and 40 wooden tokens. Before setting the game up for the first time, open this pouch and then place a white sticker into each of these wooden tree sections. Within here, there are also recycled wood pulp tokens. These are simply set aside. Now we can set up the game. Begin by unfolding the board and place it between all of the players. For the next step, randomly choose a number of forest tiles equal to the number of players, and for this instruction, I'm going to be assuming we're playing a 3-player game. That means 3 out of these 5 tiles are randomly taken, with the remaining placed back in the box. Then, without looking at them, place these chosen tiles into a stack next to the game board. Moving into the next step of setup, let's focus on the forest area of the board. We begin this step by taking 4 tree sections, which have the white stickers placed into the recess as I showed before. These are placed face down. Then take 2 of them and stack them on top of the other 2. Place each of these double-stacked tree sections face down onto any 2 of these 4 dotted circular spaces on the board. Next up, we focus over here on the sawmill, and we will place 2 individual tree sections face down anywhere within this brown circular sawmill area. After that, we move clockwise to the pulp mill and take 2 wooden tree sections and place them with the white pulp side face up, each of these going on one of the dotted circle icons that shows 3 coin icons in them. You'll notice there are only 2 of those, and each of these are covered. Then we complete this step by placing the remaining tree sections with the pulp side down anywhere in this generalized forest area on the board. Next, find this tuck box here and open it. Inside, you'll find a series of cards, including 5 warehouses. Now, each player chooses the warehouse that matches the color that they will play in this game. In this instance, we could say there will be a purple, yellow, and red player. Place the unused warehouses back into the box, and then find the player aids, and each player takes the card that matches their color and places it nearby them. After this, find the box that has the action cards in it and open it up, and then find the single end card, put it to the side, and shuffle the rest of these action cards. After that, deal 5 face-down cards to each player, and each player can look at their cards, but not at their opponent's cards. Then, place the remaining cards next to the board within any of these quadrants, but not covering up any of these brown areas, and then place 4 of these action cards face up, visible to all players. Next, find the customer cards that were in the same deck as the warehouses, as well as the player aids, and find the 5 customers with the gray background. These are the starting customers, and each player gains 1 random starting customer, placing the customer face up near their warehouse. The unused starting customer cards can be placed back into the box, and then take the remaining customer cards, shuffle them up, and put the deck face down near the board, and then reveal 3 of these cards face up so that all players can see them. Let's now focus on the water treatment and reserve area of the board. You'll notice there is a color matching each of the players, and we now take 2 water tokens and place them onto the matching color spots for each player that is in the game. Then create the general water supply, taking 6 water tokens per player, and place them up here. You can stack them or just leave them in this general area above that dotted line. If playing with less than 5 players, there will be remaining water tokens, and these can be placed back in the box. Let's now focus on the solar panel area of the board, where you can see there is a section for each player color. Take 2 energy tokens and place them at the top of each of the player colors that are being used in the game. Then take 6 energy tokens per player and put these into an energy supply off to the side of the board. In this 3-player game, there are 18 tokens here, and because there are less than 5 players, there are unused tokens which can be placed back into the box. Now it's time to place the paper sheets. You will find these cards within this tuck box, so open it up, and inside you will find 60 double-sided paper sheets. Take 15 of these sheets from the top and place them onto this indicated space on the board. Then take the end card that was placed to the side and put it on top of that stack, and then place more cards from this deck on top. The amount that you place will depend on the player count. In a 2-player game, you will place 20. In a 3-player game, you place 27. In a 4-player game, you place 32. And in a 5-player game, you place 35 cards on top. In this example, we have 3 players, so 27 paper cards are put on top of this stack. I do want to point out that if you want the game to be longer, you can place more cards on top of this stack, but for your first game, it is recommended to go with the numbers as stated. The remaining paper cards can be placed back into the box. Next, create a general supply nearby that contains all of the money tokens. Those come in 1s, 5s, 10s, and 50s with these paper notes. Then place the returning customer tokens in this general supply, as well as the 6 recycled pulp tokens, and the solar panels associated with each player in the game. There are 3 solar panels for each player. For the final step of setup, the player who has most recently climbed a tree will become the starting player, or you can choose the starting player randomly. The starting player will take the starting player token, and that will be placed nearby them, and it will stay next to that player for the entire game. We are now fully set up and ready to play the game. Now, in this game, each player is managing their resources and their general productivity as we collectively work through the overall process to create paper. This is a circular economy where trees must be grown and planted into the forest. Those trees can be harvested and processed into wood at the sawmill, and then from there, that wood can be turned into virgin fiber pulp, or we could actually recycle paper that's already been delivered to turn into recycled pulp. Finally, with this paper pulp, we can create paper by spending the energy that we've harvested through solar power. The paper that we create is then delivered to our customers or our warehouse, where it can wait to then be delivered to customers later on. And when you deliver to customers, you will gain the indicated amount of money, and the player who has the most money at the end of the game will win. Now that was an overview of what you'll be doing in the game, and let's now dive into the specifics of how the game is played. Now, each player, starting with the player with the first player token, is going to take a turn. Then the next player will go in clockwise order, and you will continue to take turns going clockwise until the end of the game is triggered, which I will explain later on. During each player's turn, one of 3 turn options can be chosen, those being playing an action card from that player's hand, or taking action cards, or making an investment. Let's begin by discussing the play 1 action card option. The way this works is the active player chooses one of their hidden cards in their hand, and they then play that card to any one of the 4 action areas of the board. The chosen card is placed into the selected action area so that all previous cards, as well as this pre-printed card on the board, have their icons visible. Then the player generates action points and performs those actions. In the future, when a player places a card over here, they will overlap it like that so that, again, all of the previous icons are visible, and there is no limit to the number of cards that can be placed into an action area. Once again, during a turn, only 1 card can be played though, and after it is placed, action points are generated. For each icon on the card placed, the associated action points will be generated. There are 4 different options with solar, water, money, as well as productivity with the gear. For each icon on the card that was played, you count the number of those icons on every card that's been played in this area, and you gain 1 action point for each of those shown icons. In this example, the player putting this here will get 1 solar action point because there's only 1 sun icon, 1 water action point, but 2 productivity action points. In the future, if a player put this card down, they would get 2 solar action points, 2 water action points, and 1 money action point, but no productivity action points because there are no productivity icons on the card that they just played. After generating action points, the player will use every action point to do the indicated action. We can start with the simplest action type, which is the coin. The player simply takes one coin from the supply for every money action point that they have. Having the most money at the end of the game is how you win, so this is certainly something to consider. Next up, there is the water action points. For each water action point, the player will take one water token from the water purification area and place it into their water reserve, and there is no limit to the number of tokens that can be placed onto a player's water reserve, but you can only place water if there is an available token within the water purification area. Once again, for every water action point you have, you place one water over here. If you had 3 water action points, you would take 3 of these tokens and place them onto your water reserve. Next up, there is the solar action. For each one of these action points, the player will generate energy and then place these evenly across all of the solar panels that are in the game. For example, if the current player had 4 solar action points, they would place 4 energy, and we can see there are 3 solar panels currently, so they'd have to place 1 into each of these, keeping the placement even, and then with this remainder, they would put that onto any of these solar panels, but they'd most likely put it onto their own solar panel. It is worth noting that by making investments, players can place new solar panels down, which will gain energy icons evenly like the original ones when solar action points are performed. Solar panels are created with the make an investment action, which I will explain later. It is worth noting that there is no limit to the number of energy that can be placed onto each solar panel, but there is a limited amount of energy in the supply, so you cannot create energy if there are no tokens available in the general supply. We've now covered 3 out of the 4 action point types with the money, water, and solar types, but the last one is productivity, and this is where you engage with the specific part of the board where you place that card. Each productivity action has a different effect depending on the action area where the card was placed, and there are 4 of these action areas around the board, each representing a part of the paper creation process. Let's explain all 4 of these now, beginning with growing and planting trees. So let's focus here, and there are 2 steps to this action. You perform the first step first, which is growing, and you have to have at least 1 productivity action to activate this area, but the number of productivity actions you have will not affect growing. Now for this, we are going to stack a new wood section on top of every wood section that is placed over here in the forest. We can see the icons representing that over here. So in this example, we would place this wood section there, bringing that tree to a size 3, and we'd place that wood section there. And it is worth noting that trees cannot grow higher than 3, so a 4th one will never be stacked. Now again, every tree that's out here will grow. So if at the start of the action, there had been a size 1 tree here, and a size 3 tree there, we would not add a 4th here, but we would add a 3rd onto that tree and a 2nd onto that one, showing all of the trees growing up to their maximum of 3 wood segments. That completes the growing part of this action, and then the player will plant 1 or more trees. To explain this, I'm going to remove these tokens, and now we can see the player has 2 productivity action points, and for each productivity action point, a new tree can be planted. The way this works is you take a wood segment and you place it with the white side down, and it has to be put onto an empty dotted circular space within the overall forest. Now again, for every productivity point, you can plant a tree. So in this example, the active player could plant 2 trees. We can see there are 2 empty spots, and when you plant a tree, you gain money equal to the number of coin icons that was just covered. So in this example, they could plant that tree and that one because they have the 2 productivity action points. There are going to be more forests planted throughout the game through the make an investment action, which I will describe later on, and as you can see, this will increase the number of spots where new trees can be planted. You now know how to grow and plant trees, and for the next action to discuss, we will move to the sawmill where trees can be harvested. Focusing down here, you can see for every productivity action point the player has, they can harvest 1 tree, and that tree can have 1, 2, or 3 wood segments in it. So for a single productivity point, the player could harvest this tree. Then they will gain a single money for every wood section in that tree. In this case, they would gain 3 money, and then the wood sections will be placed over here into the sawmill area. If they had 2 productivity points, that would have spent 1 of them, and they could spend another one harvesting another tree. They'd probably go for this one because, again, it would give them 3 more coins. Once these wood sections are placed in the sawmill area, they represent harvested wood, and players can use this wood to create pulp. This area is the pulp mill, and for every productivity action point the player has, they can choose one of two different options. The first option lets them create virgin fiber pulp by first discarding one water token from any player's water reserve. If it was the purple player's turn, they could discard a water from their own reserve, or maybe they discard a water from the red player's reserve. As a strategy point, it's better to spend water from opponent's reserves as opposed to your own. After spending a water from any general reserve, one harvested wood is taken from the sawmill and then flipped over to its virgin fiber pulp side, and then the player puts it onto the leftmost spot in the top or bottom row within the virgin pulp mill section. After placing it down, they'll gain money equal to the number of coins covered. In this case, it shows 2 coins, and the left 2 spots show 3 coins, and I'll be shortly explaining how this pulp is removed, which will uncover those 3 coin spots. Now that was one of the 2 options available for each productivity action point, and the other one involves creating recycled paper pulp. This also costs 1 water token from any player's reserve, but it also has a delivered paper cost. When we focus in, that says the current player must discard either a new paper or a recycled paper that has already been delivered to one of their customers. Delivered paper will be placed underneath customers, and I'll explain how we deliver this very soon. It's worth noting that paper in your warehouse has not been delivered yet. When you spend a delivered paper to create recycled wood pulp, you choose any of your customers and you take their rightmost delivered paper, whether that be the new paper or previously recycled paper, and that paper is removed from the game. Then the current player takes a recycled wood pulp token and places it onto the leftmost empty dotted spot within the recycled pulp area, and then they gain 1 money. So once again, for each productivity action point, you can either create a virgin fiber pulp or a recycled fiber pulp. And if you have multiple productivity points, for each of them, you could choose one or the other option. But of course, each option costs 1 water. And if there are no water tokens in any general supplies, then you won't be able to choose either of these options. So this is how wood pulp is made, and that is used to create paper, which we can find over here to the left. Let's focus over here where the paper is made. For every productivity action point, the player has to spend 1 energy to either create 1 virgin fiber paper or 1 recycled paper. Now, the energy that is spent can either come from that player's solar panel area, or if that player has no energy remaining, they could spend any energy from their opponents, but for each energy they spend from an opponent, the current player has to pay that opponent 1 money, and that opponent is not allowed to decline the spending of their energy. Once an energy is spent, the player can create virgin fiber paper or recycled paper. To create the virgin fiber paper, they have to take 1 of the virgin fiber pulp tokens and place it face down back into the forest. And when you take these, you must take them from the left to the right before any of the 3 coin spots can be emptied. After removing this and placing it back into the general supply, 1 virgin fiber paper is taken from the top of the deck and either delivered to a customer or placed into that player's warehouse. Now, the customers show what type of paper they want. In this case, we can see that starting customer wants a virgin fiber paper because of the white background. Players are allowed to make investments, which will gain them new customers. And you can see this customer, for example, wants recycled paper with that tan background and the recycled icon. If this was the situation, and this player gained a virgin fiber paper, they would have to place it here and not there because that spot must be recycled. And as you deliver paper, it must be placed on the leftmost spot for one of their customers. If there was no place to put that paper down onto one of the customers, then the player can add that paper into their warehouse as long as the warehouse has an empty space for it. And at any time, if any paper in the warehouse can be delivered to a customer, then you can deliver it as a free action. For example, in the future, if you were to make an investment to gain a new customer and they could take 1 of the paper in the warehouse, you could immediately deliver it, and then you gain the indicated coins that is covered by that delivered paper. So that's how virgin fiber paper is made, but we can of course make recycled paper instead. Again, 1 energy is spent, and then a recycled pulp token must be removed from this area. You cannot create a recycled paper if there is no token here, and of course you cannot create virgin fiber paper if there is no virgin fiber pulp. Now when you create recycled paper, you take the top card from this deck and you flip it over to show the recycled side. and then either deliver that recycled paper to a customer that wants it, or you place it into an empty spot in your warehouse. Once again, as paper is delivered, you gain money equal to the value on the coin that was just covered up. At this point, I've now described how all 4 of the action areas work. To move through the process of growing and planting trees, creating harvested wood, then making pulp out of that wood, and using that pulp to create paper that is delivered to happy customers. The next thing to discuss is returning customers. To explain this, let's focus over here on this customer, and they've already had 2 deliveries, and they have 1 open delivery slot. They want a virgin fiber paper here, and as soon as that is delivered, the current player will gain 5 money, and then that is the returning customer icon. As soon as this is covered, the current player places a returning customer token onto the leftmost open returning customer icon space on that customer card. They then gain the money indicated if it shows money. It's worth noting some customers have an X, so when that's placed, no money is gained. Now, the returning customer token can never be removed, but the delivered paper can be removed when creating recycled wood pulp, as I've explained earlier. When recycling, the rightmost delivered paper is removed from the game, and that opens up a delivery slot for that customer again. As soon as the returning customer icon is once again covered up, this token has to be placed down. Of course, in this instance, that player would get 5 money again, and then the player gains any money that was covered by that token. And once there are 2 returning customer tokens on a customer, you can never deliver to that customer again. You can turn their delivered paper into recycled pulp, but again, you cannot deliver here because both of these spots are taken. So you could create 3 recycled pulp entirely, and then you would not interact with this customer again. What this means is if you place 1 returning customer token and then create recycled pulp, perhaps before delivering to them again, you create another recycled pulp. So now you can deliver to this spot, which would not place a returning customer token until you deliver again. There is a way to gain new customers, and I'll explain that very soon when I discuss investments. But as you can see, by recycling paper, you can continue to deliver to the same customers before both of these tokens are filled in, so that you can gain as much money as possible from them as a customer. At this point, I've explained every element to the first out of 3 action options that a player can choose on their turn, that being taking 1 card from their hand and placing it face up onto any of the 4 action spots. Let's now discuss the second action option, which is much simpler than the first, and this involves drawing cards. The active player can take every card associated with any one of the 4 action spaces, or they could draw 1 or more cards from the market. Now, when you draw cards from an action space, you take all of them, and there is no hand limit to the number of cards you can be holding. So if they chose this, they'd take 1 card, which is probably not what they do. They might go over here and take all 5 of these cards that have been previously placed into their hidden hand. When choosing this option, instead of drawing cards from one of the action areas, the current player can draw from the market. The way this works is they select either the sun, the coin, or the water icon, and then they take all of the face-up cards in the market that show that icon. It's worth noting you cannot choose the productivity icon when drawing cards from the market. So, for example, if the current player said coins, they would take both of these cards because they each have a coin, and instead, if they said water, they would take both of these cards. It's possible that all of these cards might have the icon, in which case they would draw all 4 of them. After cards are drawn, for example, let's say they said coins to take these into their hand, you immediately refill this market so there are 4 cards showing. That completes the draw cards option that you can perform on your turn. This leaves the third and final turn option, which involves making an investment. There are 3 different investments that you can make, one being placing a forest tile, another is gaining a customer, and the third involves building a solar panel. Let's begin by discussing the forest. Now, in order to make any investment, you must discard 3 cards from your hand that show the icon that matches up with that investment type. We can take a look at the player aid and see that when you're putting a new forest tile down, you must discard 3 cards that show the water icon. The current player removes those 3 cards from their hand and places them into a discard pile, and then they place a new forest tile. Each of these tiles shows 5 money on the back, and the player takes the topmost tile, gains 5 coins immediately into their area, then flips this tile over and places it into this forest area. The position this tile is placed does not impact gameplay. but it probably makes sense to put the first one here or there. The second one might go here, and then the third one could probably go there. Again, the positioning doesn't matter, and as these are placed, this will add more places for trees to be planted. And as you can see, there is a variety within these tiles. Each of these has 3 spots for trees, whereas this one shows 4. The next investment option involves gaining a new customer. Do this by discarding 3 cards from the hand that show the coin icon. Then take any one of the 3 customers that are face up and place them in front of you and immediately refill this so that there are 3 customer cards showing. The final investment option involves constructing new solar panels. 3 cards showing the sun icon must be discarded, and then a new solar panel for that player is placed. Each player can have up to 4 solar panels, with the first solar panel, of course, being printed on the board. Remember, when energy is created, the tokens have to be placed evenly across all of the solar panels, so the more solar panels you invest in, the easier it will be to gain free energy for yourself, as all players are performing solar action options. You now know how the investment option works, and that completes covering the 3 different options that you can choose for your turn. Again, one being placing an action card onto one of the action spots and performing those action points. The second option being taking cards, and the third option involving making 1 investment. After choosing one of these options and completing it, the next player in clockwise order will take their turn. Now you will keep playing the turn until the end game is triggered, and that happens by producing paper, which is of course the main goal of the game. If you remember, during setup, an end card was placed 15 cards from the bottom, and if at any point during a player's turn the end card is revealed, the end of the game will be triggered and this card is removed. Once that trigger happens, players will continue to take turns until the player to the right of the player with the starting player token has taken their turn. At that point, everyone will perform 1 more turn, and then the game will be over and will then perform final scoring. This scoring is simple, with every player counting the number of water tokens that is remaining in their reserve and the number of energy tokens on all of their solar panels, and then they gain 1 money for each of that remaining energy and water. Once players have added the endgame money to the money they gained throughout the game, they then count their money, and the player with the most money will win the game, and they can take one of these Paper Maker of the Month stickers and put it onto their shirt to show that they were the best paper maker at the table. At this point, I've covered all of the rules to the game, and I hope you enjoy playing Arboro.